I'm a 36-year-old woman, the oldest of three siblings. Percy, who's 34, is the baby of the family, and Molly, at 28, came as a bit of a surprise to our parents. Growing up, Percy and I had a pretty standard upbringing, but Molly was always treated like the princess. Maybe it was because she was the youngest, or perhaps because she was such a novelty after Percy and me. Our dad, bless him, would occasionally try to rein her in, but Mom? No chance she'd ever say a word against her darling Molly. And she definitely wouldn't stand for anyone else criticizing her, no matter how obnoxious she got. Being the older ones, Percy and I learned to take Molly's cutting remarks with a grain of salt, at least until we hit our mid-20s. Molly inherited Mom's good looks, and she wasn't shy about reminding us. I remember at one Thanksgiving, things got heated when Molly laid into Percy for choosing a literature degree, saying he'd end up leeching off the family. Another time, she and I nearly stopped speaking for weeks after she told me my workaholic habits and tired eyes would scare off any potential suitors. Molly's always been loud and full of herself, and Mom always had her back, brushing off the hurt she caused as jokes and calling us oversensitive when we tried to push back. Everything changed 8 years ago when Dad passed away over time. Percy and I naturally began to drift apart from our mother and Molly. Even though Dad favored Molly to some extent, especially compared to Mom's adoration, he was still the one who held our family together. His passing changed everything. Without him, Percy and I no longer felt compelled to visit Molly and our mother as frequently as we did during Dad's illness. We'd see them occasionally at other people's gatherings, maybe Thanksgiving or some Christmases, but we were content with the distance. They didn't make much effort to keep in touch either. And with Dad having left them financially secure and me thriving as a CFO, we all managed our own lives separately. Our family dynamics had settled into a clear divide. Percy and I on one side, and Mom and Molly on the other, with an unspoken wall between us that I found quite comfortable. It's been this way for years, and I don't think they should expect anything from me, just as I don't expect anything from them. Recently, though, I discovered their perspective might be different. A few weeks back, I helped Percy cover his medical bills after he broke his ankle. His insurance only covered hospital expenses, so I took care of everything else: medications, physiotherapy visits, and hiring a nurse since he lives alone. He tried to dissuade me, but being between jobs while starting his online magazine, he couldn't afford it yet. As CFO, I could, and I was happy to help. When Mom and Molly found out, however, they seemed to think it meant I was their personal IDM. That's how I ended up in this predicament. 3 days ago, Molly called out of the blue while I was working. She'd found a penthouse apartment she loved and wanted my financial help to buy it. At 28, she felt embarrassed living with Mom and needed to move out. She knew I'd help Percy, so she expected me to foot half the bill. It struck me as absurd because for the past 8 years, we rarely had meaningful conversations, and whenever we did meet, it felt obligatory. Molly struggled to be pleasant towards us. Now, she assumed I'd fund her first apartment. For context, Molly claims she's a freelance graphic designer, but she lacks formal training or a design degree. Making a few posters for Dad's unused business doesn't qualify her. She claims to work with exclusive clients, mostly family, thanks to Mom's influence, but it's more hobby than career. Living with Mom at 28 isn't surprising. I bluntly told her I wouldn't assist. At 28, she should find a real job and pay for the apartment herself. She argued I help Percy with medical bills, though he could afford them unlike her. As the eldest, I should look after her, she claimed. But Percy's situation was different. He was between jobs and had a good relationship with me, unlike her. I didn't owe her help. I simply said no and hung up. She tried calling, but I ignored her. Later, Mom called, furious. I expected her reaction. Saying no to her daughter would upset her. She complained about the unfair treatment towards Molly, accusing me of favoritism. She had finalized an apartment search and asked Uncle, now running Dad's business, for help. Dad intended for him to take over, but I chose a different path. Mom lives off Dad's shares comfortably. But Molly's extravagant lifestyle strained her finances. Mom wanted my help to ease her burden, promising it'd benefit her in the future. I couldn't help but dismiss it. It wasn't my problem to solve. I felt compelled to tell Molly to either secure a stable job to afford her desired home or accept living with Mom until 35. Mom exploded, accusing me of ingratitude, claiming my upbringing obligated me to help siblings. I rejected her flawed logic, asserting my decision. Threatening to go no contact seemed bold. We were already low contact for years. After Dad passed, Percy and I accepted Mom's favoritism. I stood firm that favoring Percy was fair. I owed no apologies. Mom's threat didn't faze me. I welcomed the silence. I told her bluntly that Molly wasn't the center of our lives, as Mom believed. We had our own lives separate from her demands. I found relief expressing this, causing Mom to threaten permanent silence, which I welcomed, adding I might not invite her to my wedding, preferring those who deserve it. She was taken aback. Recently engaged to Jackson, who appreciates my career-driven nature. I realize people value ambitious women like me. Mom and Molly met Jackson, but he understands our dynamic. We celebrated privately and planned to marry soon. I had debated inviting my mother and Molly to the wedding out of courtesy, but now I felt it unnecessary and satisfying not to. Yet, yesterday, Jackson received a message from my mother on social media, expressing disappointment and announcing their decision to cut me off permanently. She blamed me for severing our family connection, which left me feeling guilty. Am I the asshole for being okay with her cutting me off? Update 1. Thank you all for the overwhelming support and understanding in the comments. It made me realize I shouldn't fret over my mother's feelings when she's never cared about mine. I spoke with Percy and he echoed your sentiments, suggesting they were manipulating me. Jackson, too, sensed their hurt, but didn't explicitly say I should apologize. I could tell he struggled with this because he values family deeply. His positive interactions with my mother and Molly misled him about our strained relationship, so I got Percy to explain everything to Jackson, and after that, Jackson's perspective changed almost instantly. He said his parents had never treated him or his siblings that way, and if they had, he would have cut them off without hesitation. Now that everything is sorted out, we've all blocked my mother and Molly. It feels liberating to finally cut ties with them after pretending to be a family for so long. In truth, my mother has always favored Molly over Percy and me, and now we prioritize our peace of mind over trying to maintain a facade of family unity. Update 2. It's been a week since we cut off contact with my mother and Molly, and this morning our uncle contacted Percy and me. He informed us that our mother had decided to transfer half of her shares to Molly, which he thought was a terrible idea due to Molly's incompetence. Our uncle wanted us to persuade our mother against this decision. He explained that not only was our mother transferring shares, but she also wanted Molly to have voting power in the company, potentially causing trouble as our uncle manages and runs the business. He preferred to avoid confronting our mother about this, as she was insistent on these changes and already had voting powers as a shareholder. We found ourselves in a situation where our uncle, who had always been supportive and looked out for us since our father passed away, approached us urgently. He expressed his concern over our mother's decision to transfer shares and grant voting power to Molly in the company. Knowing Molly's lack of competence and business acumen, he feared the consequences this could bring to the company he managed. After discussing it with Percy, we decided we couldn't let this happen. Despite our resolve to cut ties with our mother, we felt compelled to intervene for our uncle's sake. Reluctantly, we visited our mother's place, knowing Molly's presence would complicate the discussion. Ignoring her, we confronted our mother about her demands, emphasizing how detrimental it would be to grant Molly such authority in the company. Initially dismissive, our mother finally acknowledged us when we pressed the issue. She retorted that we had no right to dictate her decisions, citing past grievances with us. She demanded we leave, but Molly interjected, asserting her right to participate in the family business, which neither Percy nor I had pursued seriously. I struggled to keep calm, reminding our mother that our father had explicitly wished for us to stay out of the company affairs, a sentiment our uncle shared. I urged her to respect our father's wishes and our uncle's authority, warning that going against this would disrespect our father's legacy. The tension was palpable, but we stood firm, appealing to our mother's sense of respect for our father's intentions. It was a difficult confrontation, but one that needed to happen to prevent further turmoil in our family and the company our father had built. After my reminder about our father's wishes seemed to give them pause, Molly quickly grasped that her chances of gaining a foothold in the company were slipping away. She launched into an argument, accusing me of already cutting ties and threatening to call the police if I didn't leave immediately, asserting that I had no place there since I had declared us not family anymore. Percy intervened, urging her to stop. While I persisted in reasoning with my mother, I emphasized our father's explicit desire to keep us out of company matters, stressing how he had invested his heart and soul in building it and trusted only his brother to manage it after him. We had all agreed to honor his wishes to avoid legal disputes and preserve his legacy. I highlighted my own decision to pursue a separate career path, respecting our father's vision, unlike Molly, who lacked any business acumen. I pleaded with my mother to reconsider, suggesting we set aside our differences for our father's sake. Throughout this, Molly continued to shout accusations, claiming I was jealous and couldn't bear to see her happy. My mother remained silent for a while, eventually telling us all to stop and asking Percy and me to leave. She promised to think it over and inform our uncle, but she also expressed feeling insulted by our earlier decision to block her, declaring she wanted no further contact with us. Reluctantly, we left, while Molly stayed behind. Since then, Percy and I have been hoping my mother has reconsidered and will no longer push for Molly's involvement in the company. I discussed this with Jackson, who reassured me that I did my best despite our strained relationship, and now it was up to my mother to decide. I've updated my uncle, who remains cautious as we await my mother's final decision, but I'm optimistic that she's had a change of heart regarding Molly. Update 3: It's been 2 weeks, and we've learned from our uncle that after much deliberation, my mother has agreed that Molly should not have a say in the company's management since my father made it clear that his brother's decisions should be respected. Molly won't receive voting rights, but will get preferred shares in the company. My mother transferred some shares to Molly, ensuring she has a stable income. I'm grateful that my dad's company won't suffer because of her. Despite this, my mother, Percy, and I still have no contact. Just to clarify, our father left shares of the company to my mother, but Percy, Molly, and I inherited other assets that aren't relevant here. People assume we got nothing, but that's not true. I mentioned my father's bias towards Molly, but he wasn't blind to her flaws like my mother was. That's why we had a better relationship with him. He's passed away now, and I prefer to remember him fondly without dwelling on imperfections. So, please understand, I'm not portraying him as perfect. Rest assured, I'm not. Update 4: Hey, so it's been a couple of months, and so far, we have had absolutely zero contact with my mother and Marley. And we love it. It really feels like all the toxicity has been removed from our lives, and we're all very happy, and I'm happier than ever because I'm getting married in a week. Invitations were sent out about a month ago, and obviously Molly and my mother did not receive any. I didn't think that they would even care about it. But a couple of my relatives told me that when Molly and my mother figured out that they were not invited to the wedding and everybody else was since, I guess my uncle might have told them about it. As he is invited, they completely flipped out and started asking everybody else not to attend my wedding either, but so far most people seem to have ignored them. I don't know what they even hope to achieve, but they will not attend my wedding because I don't think that they have that sort of sway in the family, at least against me anyway. I found it amusing that this was going to work because it just became an excuse not to interact with my mother and Marley since they had been acting quite insufferable in the last couple of months. Apparently my mother had put up our old house for rent and moved into the penthouse apartment that Molly had been raving about. It also gave Molly an excuse to continue living with her mother because she wouldn't be able to afford that apartment on her own in a million years, and also pretend like she was doing a great service to her family by still continuing to live with her mother and taking care of her. So she put a positive spin on her prophetic situation and portrayed herself as the hero, and my mother just went along with it and portrayed herself as the helpless little woman still relying on her daughter and ever so grateful to have her support. Well, good for them. I guess if nothing else, they at least would have made brilliant actresses and storytellers. But anyway, Percy's magazine is doing well, and I'm hoping that he becomes even more successful in the future. And as for me, I'm getting married to the love of my life while also managing to have a successful career. I guess everything that Molly had said turned out to be wrong, so jokes on her. Stay tuned for more stories from Argo Relationships. Update 4: It's been a couple of months, and we've had absolutely zero contact with my mother and Molly, which we're quite happy about. It feels like all the toxicity has been removed from our lives, and we're all very content. Personally, I'm happier than ever because I'm getting married in a week. The invitations were sent out about a month ago, and unsurprisingly, Molly and my mother didn't receive any. I didn't expect them to care, but a few relatives mentioned that Molly and my mother found out they weren't invited and completely lost it. Apparently, my uncle, who was invited, might have informed them. They've been trying to convince everyone else not to attend my wedding, but thankfully, most people seem to be ignoring them. I'm not sure what they hope to achieve, but they won't affect my wedding plans. Ironically, this situation has become a convenient excuse to avoid interacting with my mother and Molly, who've been quite insufferable lately. I heard that my mother rented out our old house and moved into the penthouse apartment Molly had been boasting about. It allowed Molly to keep living with her mother since she couldn't afford that apartment on her own. They're spinning it positively, with Molly portraying herself as a hero for taking care of her mother, and my mother as a grateful, helpless woman reliant on her daughter's support. Well, good for them, I suppose. They could have been great actresses and storytellers. Anyway, Percy's magazine is thriving, and I hope for even more success for him in the future. As for me, I'm looking forward to marrying the love of my life while balancing a successful career. It turns out everything Molly said was wrong, so the joke's on her.